I thought I understood her. Every quiet smile, every gentle touch, every truth she never said out loud. But the day she told me he doesn't matter was the day I first saw the fear in her eyes. I never planned to grow so close to her. It just happened in the quiet, ordinary moments neither of us paid attention to at first. The way she would walk into a room with that calm, collected confidence, yet still soften her voice when she greeted me, as if talking to me required a gentler version of herself. I always noticed that softness. Maybe that's why everything felt so natural between us. We had this habit of sitting near each other without planning it. If I was leaning back in a chair, she'd pull hers just close enough that our knees almost touched. If she was sitting by the window, I'd find myself drifting toward that side of the room, drawn in by her presence the way one drifts toward the warmth of sunlight. And she never moved away. She adjusted the angle of her body slightly toward me, as though her attention had its own gravitational pull. I remember one afternoon in particular. She was stirring her tea, slow circles that matched the rhythm of her thoughts. Every time she was deep in her mind, she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, but it never stayed. It always fell back with a graceful persistence. I didn't know why that small gesture captivated me, but it did. It made her look human, touchable, imperfect in a beautiful way. Our conversations didn't need effort. She would tell me about the books she was reading, the people she'd met, the little things she noticed throughout the day. I'd listen, not because I had to, but because there was something soothing in the way she spoke. Measured, thoughtful, like she weighed her words before releasing them. She was older than me, yes, but she carried her years like a poem carries meaning. Not loud, not obvious, just quietly present, in the soft lines near her eyes when she smiled, in the calm steadiness of her voice, in the confidence of someone who had lived enough to stop pretending. So when she mentioned him, it was small, almost nothing. We were talking about past choices, the kind that shape who we become. She paused, eyes lowering to the table for a breath. Then she said, almost too casually, "There was someone once, but he doesn't matter anymore." The words weren't the strange part. It was the way she said them. Her fingers tightened slightly around her cup, knuckles paling for a second. Her shoulders lifted, just barely, as if bracing against a memory. And though she lifted her head with a smile, it didn't reach her eyes the way it usually did. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but I did. Because when you care about someone, you learn to read the language they don't speak out loud. And in that brief moment, barely 2 seconds long, I felt something shift. Not between us exactly, but somewhere deeper, like a quiet warning that something from her past wasn't finished, even if she wanted to believe it was. She said he didn't matter, yet the room felt different after she said it. And for the first time since knowing her, I felt a small, unexplainable crack form inside something I had thought was unbreakable. I met him on a day that should have meant nothing, one of those ordinary afternoons where the sun hangs low and warm, and the world feels too calm for anything significant to happen. We were at a small community event, the kind she liked attending because it gave her an excuse to blend into a crowd while still observing life from a quiet corner. She always said people fascinated her more when they didn't notice her watching. I was standing beside her, close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her arm, when a voice behind us said her name. Not softly, not tentatively, just familiar. She froze for the smallest fraction of a second. It was so quick that anyone else might have missed it. The slight stiffening of her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened around her phone before she turned. But I felt it. Her presence changed, like a warm room that suddenly gets a draft. He walked toward her with a smile that belonged to someone who had once known her very well. Not the kind of smile people give to old acquaintances. Something deeper. Something that comes from shared history, even if that history isn't spoken anymore. She returned the smile, but it wasn't hers. It was polite, thin, controlled. She stood straighter, almost guarded. Her eyes softened, but not with affection. More like resignation, a quiet acknowledgement of something she had hoped to leave behind. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice warm in a way that made my stomach tighten. He extended a hand to her, not out of courtesy, but out of old habit. She reached for it, hesitated an imperceptible second, then gave a brief, distant handshake, like someone touching the handle of a door they swore they would never open again. The moment felt strange. Not dramatic, not loud, just off. I introduced myself because it felt like the right thing to do. He shook my hand with a calm, confident ease, like he was sizing me up without ever breaking eye contact. I didn't flinch, but I felt the energy shift between all three of us, subtle yet unmistakable. She pulled her hand back slowly, slipping it behind her, her fingers brushing her own wrist as if grounding herself. Her posture was too composed, too intentional. She spoke with practiced lightness, asking him how he was, how life had been, all the questions people ask when they're trying to keep a past from stepping too far into the present. But her eyes weren't at ease. Not once. While they talked, I noticed the details she tried to hide. The tense set of her jaw, the way she exhaled slightly when he laughed, her subtle step closer to me as if she needed the small reassurance of my presence. She didn't cling. She didn't hold onto my arm. She didn't need to. The movement was enough. When he finally walked away, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her shoulders relaxed, her fingers uncurling slowly from where she'd been subconsciously gripping her own palm. He was someone from before, she said quietly, eyes trained on the ground rather than me. Someone who doesn't matter anymore, she added. But the tremor in her voice, the tiny, almost invisible one, said otherwise. And that tremor stayed with me long after he disappeared from sight. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that people have quiet days, tired days, days where their thoughts pull them inward. She was allowed that, more than allowed. I respected her space the same way I cherished her closeness. But over the next few weeks, something in her changed. Not loudly, not obviously, but gently, like a dimmer turning down the light in a room you didn't realize was getting darker. It showed in her hands first. She had this delicate bracelet she always wore, a thin, silver band that glinted softly whenever light touched it. She used to fiddle with it only when she was thinking deeply, tracing the smooth metal with the pad of her thumb. But lately, she touched it constantly, rolling it, twisting it, pressing her fingers against it like she was trying to keep her emotions from spilling. When we sat together, she still chose the seat next to mine, but she left a tiny sliver of space that wasn't there before. Not enough for someone else to notice, but enough that I felt the absence of her warmth. I missed that warmth more than I wanted to admit. Our conversations stayed gentle but shorter. Her replies drifted, sometimes fading mid-sentence as if her mind had slipped away from the present and into places I couldn't reach. She'd catch herself, give a small apologetic smile, and say, "Sorry, just thinking." But she never said about what. It wasn't the lack of words that hurt. It was the missing ease, the quiet trust she'd always carried when talking to me. We used to share small, intimate routines without naming them. She'd lean closer when she was curious, resting her forearm lightly against mine, her skin warm and steady. She'd laugh softly, her shoulder brushing my upper arm, her scent, something faintly floral and earthy, settling in the air around us. Now her laughter came late and faded early. One evening we were on a walk, our usual route near a row of old houses where vines curled over stone walls. She normally slowed her pace to match mine, her fingers occasionally brushing against my arm as we talked. But that day she walked a half step ahead, not rushing, just existing slightly apart. I watched the way she held herself, her arms folded loosely, her gaze fixed forward. There was a tiredness in her posture that didn't come from the day. It came from holding something inside for too long. I didn't confront her. Couldn't. She wasn't pulling away in anger or rejection. She was drifting, quietly, like someone trying to balance memories she didn't want to revisit with feelings she didn't know how to handle. Still, the ache inside me grew. It wasn't a sharp pain, nothing dramatic. More like a slow, deep weight settling in my chest, a heaviness that reminded me of the silence before a storm. And yet, every time she looked at me, really looked, her eyes carried a tenderness she couldn't hide, a tenderness fighting against something heavier, something older. She never said what she was afraid of. But her distance, her quietness, her lingering touches that weren't as steady as before, all of it whispered the same truth. She wasn't just thinking. She was struggling. And even though I didn't know why, I felt her slipping just a little further away each day, like a hand slowly sliding from mine, finger by finger, while pretending nothing had changed. I wasn't expecting to find her like that, standing alone outside her house, arms wrapped lightly around herself, as if she were holding something fragile inside her chest. The evening light was fading, turning the sky into a muted blend of blue and gold, and she looked almost unreal in that soft glow. Not broken, just caught between staying strong and letting herself fall apart. I approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. She noticed me before I spoke, but she didn't straighten up like she usually did. Instead, her shoulders sagged just a little, as if seeing me loosen something she'd been holding tightly all day. "You okay?" I asked gently, keeping my voice low, careful. She hesitated, too long for it to be a simple question. "I ran into him again," she finally said. Her voice was steady at first, but the way she swallowed mid-sentence betrayed her. I stepped closer, slow enough to give her room to move if she needed space. She didn't move away, but she didn't lean in either. She just stood still, grounded and floating at the same time. "It wasn't planned," she added quickly, almost defensively. "I wasn't looking for him." I believed her. Everything in her body language told me she wasn't lying. But there was something else there, something deeper. The tremor beneath her composure, the quiet fear lining her words like shadows. "What happened?" I asked. She shook her head, eyes dropping to the ground. "Nothing. We just talked. He asked how I've been. It was normal." But the word normal came out too fragile, like she didn't trust it herself. The wind stirred, brushing loose strands of her hair across her face. On instinct, I reached up and gently tucked one behind her ear. She closed her eyes for a moment, not because of the touch itself, but because of the safety it reminded her of. When she opened them, there was a softness there, but also regret. "He doesn't matter," she whispered. But the whisper was exactly the problem. It was too quiet, too forced, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I let my fingers trail lightly down her cheek before pulling away, a simple touch meant to anchor her. She didn't lean into my hand, not fully, but her breath caught slightly, as if she felt the pull but didn't trust herself to respond. "Then why does it feel like he does?" I asked softly, not accusing, just honest. She looked away, jaw tightening for a moment. "Because I hate that he can still shake me," she said, her voice trembling at the edges. "I don't want him to. I don't want any of this." I stepped close enough that our arms brushed, the warmth between us familiar and grounding. "You don't have to go through this alone," I said. Her eyes flickered toward mine, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. But instead of leaning in, she drew a careful breath and turned her face slightly away, not rejecting me, just overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. For the first time, I understood. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of what his return might awaken inside her. Fear, confusion, unfinished emotions, and how that might spill into what we were slowly building. And that realization hurt, not because she pulled away, but because part of her didn't want to and still did. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or dramatic confessions. It arrived quietly, like everything between us always had, but this time the quiet didn't soothe. It unsettled. We sat together in her living room, a place that had always felt warm, lived in, unmistakably hers. The soft amber light from the lamp touched her skin gently, highlighting the thoughtful crease in her brow and the tired heaviness beneath her eyes. She looked like someone who had been fighting an invisible battle for too long. She sat on the couch, knees drawn slightly inward, fingers loosely wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped from in the last 20 minutes. I sat beside her, close enough to feel the heat from her arm, but far enough to respect the space she seemed to be holding between her ribs. "You've been quiet," I said softly, careful not to push. She let out a slow exhale, the kind that comes after holding breath for too long. "I feel like I'm failing you," she murmured. That caught me off guard. I leaned in slightly. "You're not failing me." She shook her head, eyes fixed on her hands. "You don't know what's going on inside me. I don't even know." Her voice cracked. Not breaking, just bending under the weight of something she'd been carrying alone. I waited. I didn't want to fill the silence with assumptions. Finally, she spoke again, her words trembling the way someone trembles before admitting a truth they've been avoiding. "He's from a part of my life I never really processed. I tried to walk away from that past without facing it. And I thought I could. I thought it was done." Her fingers tightened around the mug, knuckles whitening. "But seeing him again twice, it stirred things up that I didn't want to feel. Not feelings for him," she added quickly, eyes flicking toward mine with urgency. "Just memories, regrets, questions I never answered." I nodded, absorbing her words, not rushing her. She continued, voice small but steady. "And then there's you. Someone who makes me feel seen in ways I wasn't ready for." She swallowed. "Someone who deserves someone with a clear heart." The ache in my chest deepened, slow and heavy. I reached out, gently taking her free hand. Her skin felt warm, tense beneath my touch. She hesitated, but she didn't pull away. Her thumb brushed faintly against my palm. An involuntary gesture, soft and familiar. A touch that felt like a memory of the closeness we used to share. But then, she let go. Not suddenly, not sharply, just slowly, gently, like someone releasing a fragile object they're afraid of dropping. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. The room felt too still, the kind of stillness that only happens right before something precious slips away. I wanted to reach for her again, but I didn't. I watched the way her eyes glistened, not with full tears, but with the shimmer of someone trying desperately to stay composed. "I don't know why this is happening," she said, voice barely above a breath. "I don't know why someone who is supposed to mean nothing can still shake me this much." Her honesty didn't make me angry, crushed me, quietly, completely, because she wasn't choosing him. She was fighting herself. And in that moment, I realized the quiet truth that hurt more than anything she could have said out loud. Sometimes you don't lose someone to another person. You lose them to the parts of themselves they aren't ready to face. I didn't expect her to show up at my door that night. It was late, quiet enough that even the streetlights felt half asleep. I heard a soft knock, gentle but persistent, the kind people make when they're unsure if they should be there at all. When I opened the door, she stood on my porch wrapped in a shawl, her hair slightly wind-tousled, her eyes tired yet somehow searching. She looked fragile. Not weak, not broken, just fragile in the way people become when they've been holding too much inside. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice low. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, as if the air inside my home carried memories of our closeness she wasn't sure she deserved anymore. She stopped near the window, her fingers brushing the fabric of the curtain, grounding herself in the simplest physical sensation. When she finally turned toward me, her eyes met mine for only a second before sliding away. "I owe you the truth," she said quietly. I sat down on the edge of the couch, giving her space but also letting her know I was listening. Fully. She remained standing for a moment, then exhaled and came to sit beside me. Not close this time, but not far either. Just within the distance where warmth could still be felt but not shared. "I didn't lose myself because of him," she began, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. "I lost myself long before he ever showed up again." She paused, long enough that I could hear the small, uneven rhythm of her breathing. "I tell people he doesn't matter because it's mostly true. But what I never admit is that the version of me who loved him, she's the one I'm afraid of." Her voice wavered. "She made choices I regret. She stayed when she shouldn't have. She excused things that hurt her." She looked at her hands, almost ashamed of them. "I'm afraid that woman still exists somewhere inside me." I shifted closer, slowly, letting my knee lightly graze against hers. A soft touch, brief but grounding. She didn't move away. Her breath hitched at the contact, the smallest sign that she felt the comfort she wouldn't ask for. "This isn't about him coming back," she continued. It's about parts of myself I thought I'd buried showing up again. And I hate that it's affecting you. I hate that I'm hurting the one person who's been good to me without asking for anything. Her voice softened to a whisper. I didn't know I could feel this much again. Until you. My chest tightened. Not with pain, but with a deep, aching tenderness. She wasn't confessing love, but something just as vulnerable. Fear that she wasn't enough because of who she used to be. I reached out and gently placed my hand over hers. Our skin touched lightly, warm, hesitant, trembling with unspoken emotion. She looked down at our hands, her lips parting in a small, breathless exhale. I'm not scared of losing you to him, I said quietly. I'm scared you'll run from yourself before you let anyone hold you. Her eyes lifted to mine, slowly, cautiously, and for the first time in weeks, the distance between us didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a bridge we were both afraid to cross, but neither of us could walk away from. And in that moment, I understood. This was never a love triangle. This was her heart learning how to trust again, and mine learning how to be patient enough to let her. Love feels strongest in peaceful moments, but its true depth is revealed when life shakes everything you thought was stable. The seventh keynote represents the storm, the phase where the bond between two hearts is no longer just about warmth, laughter, and effortless connection. It becomes a test of resilience, patience, and emotional truth. This part of the journey is where illusions fall away and only sincerity remains. The storm began quietly, as most storms do. A strange distance formed between them, unspoken, undefined, yet powerful enough to unsettle the comfort they once took for granted. Messages that once carried excitement now felt slower, replies shorter, and emotions heavier. A small misunderstanding slowly grew roots, feeding on assumptions and silence. Neither wanted to admit something was wrong, yet both felt the weight of it pressing on their chest. This keynote explores how love reacts when not everything is perfect, because perfection is never real, but connection can be. When the storm deepened, the heart entered a war with itself. Doubt whispered in one ear, memories whispered in the other. Doubt asked, "What if this is the beginning of the end?" Memories answered, "But what about everything beautiful you both built?" It was a tug-of-war between fear and faith. Love demanded vulnerability. It asked for the courage to speak honestly, even when the voice trembled. And vulnerability is one of the hardest acts, because it means exposing the most delicate pieces of the heart without knowing whether they will be held or broken. This keynote captures the emotional storm that forms when two people care too much but communicate too little. The fear of losing someone creates a quiet panic that pushes the heart into overthinking every small detail. Why didn't they say this? Why did they sound distant? Why did today feel different? Slowly, the story moves from confusion to confrontation, not the angry kind, but the honest kind. The kind where the truth finally takes shape in words, where silence is replaced with clarity, where the heart whispers the things it was too afraid to say earlier. Storms are painful, but they are necessary. They shake away expectations. They reveal hidden insecurities. They force the heart to choose between giving up or growing stronger. And in this keynote, something powerful happens. The storm becomes a mirror. Each person sees their own fears, their own mistakes, their own longing. Instead of tearing them apart, it pulls them toward a deeper understanding. It becomes the turning point where love shifts from being merely emotional to being intentional. The storm doesn't end with calm. It ends with clarity. It ends with the realization that love isn't about never fighting. It's about fighting for each other. It ends with a quiet promise. If the heart can survive the storm, it can survive anything. And from here, the story moves toward the next phase, where scars become lessons, silence becomes communication, and love becomes something stronger than before.